This episode is brought to you by Alumni Q. For over 20 years, Alumni Q has been partnering with higher education institutions to build real, lasting connections that drive engagement, whether through events, volunteer management, or personalized fundraising strategies. Their software is designed to meet busy, accomplished alumni where they are, making it easier to connect, communicate, and involve them in meaningful ways. From personalized event experiences to targeted communications, Alumni Q ensures your constituents feel seen and valued. With 96% of clients staying with them long-term, Alumni Q's active support and responsive development make sure you always have the tools you need when you need them. If you're looking for a trusted partner that truly understands higher education and is committed to helping your institution succeed, consider Alumni Q, powering the connections that last. Visit alumniq.com to learn more. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for listening to Alumless World for March 21st, 2025. This is the Exploring Educational Advancement in West Africa edition. On Alumless World, we talk about constituent engagement strategies and education advancement from a global perspective. And we try to take a broader view of advancement and how colleges, universities, and international schools are working to build a culture of engagement and philanthropy. I am joined by my fantastic co-host, Nicole Kempton. Nicole lives over in London. What's going on today in London, Nicole?
Hi, Ryan. I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing great. Yes. And I'm Ryan Catherwood. Nicole and I are both consultants with Chris Marshall Advancement Consulting. I am based here in Richmond, Virginia, USA, which is just south of Washington, D.C., a couple of hours.
And we publish a new episode of Alumless World every other Friday at 11:30 a.m. GMT. And similar to the original Alumless, we do a 30-minute show on LinkedIn and YouTube, and then an additional 30-minute bonus segment that's available on the Alumless World podcast feed. And so you want to make sure that you're adding us to your podcast feed so that you get all that extra great content. And we also invite you to follow Chris Marshall Advancement Consulting on LinkedIn. We publish a lot of great content there, get good conversations going. So we hope you'll join our community. And of course, we're grateful to Steve Rittler and the team at Alumni Q for being our Alumless World presenting sponsor this week.
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. A couple of good articles published last week on the CMAC LinkedIn feed. Got a little conversation going. So I hope you'll check it out and chime in on those. But maybe let's get our show started today. Maybe tell us about today's guest.
Well, today's guest is Louis Adekola, and Louis wears a number of different hats, and we're going to hear about several of them today. He's executive director of Edvant Edge Africa, which focuses on advancement in higher education in Africa, while also training young advancement leaders across the continent. And he's also the West Africa Regional Officer for the University of Sussex and the convener for the International Education Africa Summit and Awards. And he's also the host of the Tyne Africa podcast, which covers topics in international education. And his contributions to global education have earned him a bunch of awards, including the World Youth Forum Award in Egypt, the Royal African Leadership Award, and recognition as one of Africa's 100 most influential young people. And so, real high achiever and a frequent, Louis is also a frequent delegate and speaker at different global education summits, and is a real advocate for educational advancement and a role model for young leaders across Africa and beyond. So we're thrilled to welcome you today, Louis.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to having you.
So why don't we back up? Because I think we heard a bit about some of the amazing things that you've done, but why don't we start at the beginning, and you can tell us a little bit about yourself and what drew you personally to a career in education and advancement.
Thank you. That's a great great introduction, and I'm so honored to be on the podcast and, of course, the show today. For me, it's I had a very interesting journey into working in education. I actually studied education in school, in university, a very, very unfamiliar sort of route for young people to go in my country. I didn't want to study education, because of course, it's not a very popular, very fun kind of course to study down here. I wanted to study business, but I was admitted to study educational management. So I studied educational management, but I've always been someone who aspires to be more, who always look for more opportunities to make impact, to grow capacity, and all of that. And then while I was studying educational management, I was part of an organization called SIFE, Students in Free Enterprise at the time, but now Enactors, for those who might know. And then from there, I was exposed to a lot of opportunities to build projects off the ground, to raise funds for it, to pitch, to potential funders, and build networks, go for competition, and report back to the university. So that sort of got my vice chancellor impressed with this teenager who is doing this amazing work. Some of the things that they struggle to do with some of the veteran staff that they have on campus. And eventually reached out and said, "Oh, we want to set up this." This was when I graduated, and they said, "We want to set up this advancement office," because the vice chancellor was very well traveled and someone who understands the importance of advancement in university. And then he said, "With your networking skills and your capacity to build relationships and all of that, would like you to be a staff in the university." And I was like, "Okay, yeah, I don't mind." And then that was how I got my first introduction to advancement office generally. But then I've also had to work, extensively in terms of recruitment, in terms of marketing. And from there, you get to a point in life that you realize, this is what I'm called to do. This is my mission in life. And at that point, I realized that education is my field, and I decided I was going to further in at a master's in comparative education, and then went on to doing another master's in international education and development, and sort of have a rounded experience, from studying education management to development to working in all this different capacity, and that has helped me to build a strong capacity in the industry.
We've got a lot to talk about, Louis, and I've been really looking forward to chatting with you today. But maybe we could start by expanding out a little bit more on your student experience and then in international student recruitment. How does your experience in international student recruitment inform your approach now to alumni engagement with those same students?
International student recruitment is a very peculiar field of work. It's very important because it doesn't stand alone in itself. You can't just wake up and say, "Oh, I'm just doing international student recruitment and that's what I'm facing." You have to think of so many different things. You have to think about the marketing aspect of things, the branding side of things. You have to think about the admission process. How long does it take for people to get a feedback? You have to think about what kind of experiences, what goes out in the communications. How are the wordings? Is there someone on the ground responding to them across departments? How are we ensuring that students have a great experience? So you have to think about rankings, about cost, about, it's a lot of things that you as an international student recruiter or representative have to think about, because it makes you a major manager, gives you an eagle-eye view of a lot of things. And so for me, I've understood that one of the first set of people that people listen to before making a final decision is people who've gone through that process. And so alumni play a vital role in student recruitment, because irrespective of what part of the world the students are coming from, they're always on the lookout. Even when they're reaching out to you directly by themselves, and it's not you marketing to them, they ask you, "Do you have any African who has studied there before? Do you have any Nigerian who has studied this course?" And that gives you that edge, because you can then say, "Oh, this Nigerian came and studied this particular year. Oh, and they were actually in the student union. They were this and that." That gives that kind of full kind of experience. So for me, I think it's very important. And then involving these alumni in the process, from call campaigns to alumni events to all of these different capacities that you engage alumni in, brings so much value to the work that we do in student recruitment around the world, because again, student or applicants would listen to alumni most of the time more than the actual recruiter, because they feel you're being paid to do that, but this is someone who's experienced that.
Yeah. So an international student decides that they're going to attend a university abroad, similar to what you did, right? And then they have that experience as an international student. How do you think being an international student shapes future alumni loyalty, alumni identity? Just sort of share like what it might mean and what it meant for you to be sort of an international student and to sort of experience the university in that way.
I think that everybody listening to this call, not everybody, but most people listening to this call are people who have engaged with alumni at some point, or those who are working within the higher education sector. And we all know that student experience is like advancement 101. Student experience makes or mar the experience that you have as a fundraiser or as an alumni engagement officer, or whatever capacity you work in, maybe communications, marketing, and advancement. Because the recruitment process is usually, like I was saying, it's really a people-facing kind of experience. It's how much experience or good experience. I like to just say good experience once and for all, because if someone has a good experience in the university that they are studying in, it's very easy for them to make a decision and say, I want to send my children here. And that's how you see people saying, oh, I'm a how do they say, like when your parents has studied in a school before, and that's how it comes. Like if I've gone to a university that is great, I would want my children to go there. Before I even have old enough children, I would want my siblings to go there. I would want my friends to go there. And so it's really built on referrals. It's built on loyalty. So it's very important that we ensure that students have great experience while they're on campus, and then while they've graduated, nurturing them enough to be able to build that experience to also pave a way for even better recruitment and engagement in the future, I think.
I think, Ryan, that we just found our quote for this episode, which is student experience is advancement 101. I think when we go back and we take a clip of a video to promote this, that's what we're going to be talking about.
Very true.
And I had the pleasure of attending the RNL alumni survey results webinar last week, and one of the things that they talked about was that experience. People who say that they had a great experience as a student are many more times likely to give back to the institution as an alum. Absolutely. Right? And that starts even in the recruitment phase, right? And the community that people feel like they're joining right from the jump. So yeah, it's so important. So let's talk a little bit about your company. So you started this company, Edvant Edge Africa. What's the main focus for you there?
Okay, that's a very good question. So now let's back up a bit to the story I was telling earlier, and then we'll just continue from there. Okay. So I started working as a development officer in that university, Adekola University, where I did my first degree in Nigeria. And when I started in the office, I just realized that this was a very nice job to do, because on campus there was that, because the vice chancellor had said, oh, don't post this boy out of the department. He has to be in advancement. And everybody's like, why though? Why should he just be here? And then I started working there, like this alumni advancement board, there is the alumni association, there is the vice chancellor's office, and I can go to the vice chancellor's office anytime I want. It was very fun. But in terms of productivity, it was very challenging, because it requires a lot of learning, a lot of growing, and a lot of resources. Many of the things that we never really had access to. I got to the office, there were not enough systems or like applications or like things that we could use. Even physical resources were not there, and I had to like walk through a lot of files and documents and notes and minutes and stuff. It was taking months of my time, and I was trying to learn. So there wasn't structure, there wasn't capacity development, there wasn't anything. I was just starting off the ground, even though there was lots of work that has been done in the past before me. And so it got to a point, actually, that I built capacity by myself. I had to fund myself to go to a training in South Africa. I was able to get myself as an Africa scholar to the CASE conference in Kenya. I went to conferences in Qatar and stuff, other places. I'd invested in myself. And, the more you build capacity, the more your ability to think becomes. And so I got to a point within my 5 years of working in the university that I was creating ideas that was a bit bigger than what they could hold. Do you understand? And so I was sending proposals upon proposals, and then it would not come to fruition. And if you're someone like me who's very creative, who's very dynamic, you would understand the importance of getting things done, because if you don't do it, you feel sick. I feel sick if I don't get my ideas done. And so I felt like, okay, I needed to expand my capacity. And so we started, and I realized that this wasn't just an issue with the university where I was working. It was almost like a countrywide, even though it was not every institution in the country or in the continent, but it was almost like a countrywide, continent-wide sort of issue that we needed to address. So we started Advantage Africa as a sort of solution to bring in advancement professionals together to learn, to share ideas, to understand what things are changing, what we can do in terms of capacity. And then I think for me, it's also very important to look at those few veterans that we have in advancement offices who have worked in the past. How can they share those knowledge, with people who are younger in the sector, but also, ultimately to improve the quality of education by improving alumni engagement, by increasing financing. And I think the mission of Advantage Africa is very clear, which is to provide quality advancement support for services in transforming higher education institutions in Africa into hubs of human capital development and the most desirable study destination for people irrespective of age, gender, background, and social status.
And so what kinds of things are you working on with people when you go to work with a university or a community? What does that look like for you?
Yeah. So what we do are in different capacities. Of course, we work as a consulting company, because of the understanding that we have of the African higher education sector, with all the degrees that I have. I'm very focused on higher education for me because I feel is a niche that, is not really, there's not a lot going on for in the continent. There's a lot of investment and support for primary and secondary education because it's very important, like literacy and all of that. But I feel that higher education is very important. If you want people to create a better future and all of that, you really need to invest in higher education. And so usually we work with them in terms of strategy, because I feel for me, one of the challenges that I think that higher education face in the continent, again, is not every institution, but it's just a popular sort of scenario, is that there are not many universities that has strategy, like long-term strategies. Most of the time it is the idea of the vice chancellors of that institution at that point in time that they run with. And this changes so quickly, like it's so short-lived. Do you understand? So we usually help institutions in terms of building strategies that they can work with and helping them to streamline into short-term initiatives. Sometimes we also help them build advancement offices. We train advancement office staff. We also help them with alumni relation engagement, also partnership and marketing opportunities.
And for you, when you talked about the importance of, your understanding of higher ed advancement contexts in Africa, right? What innovative alumni strategies are you seeing emerge from your work through your firm?
Yes, I think so. From our work, a bit more specifically, is that opening things up to people to understand what is possible. I
Mhm.
think usually when I talk about being innovative or creating things or getting innovative, it is not only about when you create like something completely new, but sometimes it is really a matter of taking those things that you think that you sometimes look down on, but building them and scaling them in a way that can create new results, right?
Mhm.
But also looking at what capacity that do we have, or what resources that do we have that we can tap into to create new solutions. One of the things that we've done is to bridging the gap between service providers and institutions.
Mhm.
We work as consultants. We don't have all the resources. We don't have all the capacity. Like I have, in the team, for example, we have marketers, we have policy officers, we have researchers, but we can't create all the solutions. And of course, we live in a world where technology and AI is advancing in a very, very swift space, but there are specialists in that sector. So we bridge the gap between, and as we do this consulting work with them and we engage with stakeholders from lecturers to staff to community members, we understand what kind of impact we want them to begin to make, or what kind of solutions. And then we're able to tap into our network of service providers and say, these kind of people make suggestions in that regard. But also beyond that, we do a lot of extensive research with the institution and outside of the institution, actually, to sort of provide some guidance in terms of what each institution should be looking at, in terms of solutions that can impact them as an institution, but also the community where they are instituted.
Interesting. So I'm so curious because you've got this very unique perspective. Having done your master's in comparative international education, and you've had a lot of exposure to the system in the UK as well as Nigeria and other places. From your perspective, like how do the alumni engagement strategies differ? And what can the UK learn from Nigeria and Nigeria learn from the UK?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I've been privileged to, again, when I was studying at the University of Sussex, I was privileged to also be an intern at the Development and Alumni Relations Office, which was really great experience. And of course, working in student recruitment, which is still part of the advancement sort of umbrella department. I've actually taken a lot of learnings, and I think that it's good to look at context. Context is also very important. I think one of the things that I think that African institutions or West African institutions can learn from institutions like in the UK when it comes to alumni engagement is that consistent stewardship, that engagement, that like I've graduated from Sussex now for a while. I know I have an idea, even if I don't work with the university, I would have an idea of what's going on, because there would be emails coming to me about what's happening with the university, what are news outlets saying about the university, what awards has the university won, how do we place in rankings, what opportunities are there, what kind of what students have won, what scholarships, those kind of things, that keeps you informed about the university. And sometimes you even get information about, like webinars and seminars that you can be a part of, whether or not you're still in the UK. I think when it comes to like engagement, regular engagement, that's one thing. The second thing is in terms of structures and systems. There's in my experience, not only from Sussex, but from many other universities or institutions across Europe or outside of the UK that I've engaged with, from working in this sector, I think systems is very important. When have clear plans on what you want to do and structure on how to get it done, I think that's really important. Now, to talk about what African institutions are already doing, I think one of the things that I find really fascinating is how alumni associations are built, and how alumni associations are also engaged in the process of decision making. Most universities have alumni in their councils, in the institution's councils, and they are involved in the process of decision making from department to faculties to the university as a whole. And the alumni association is also so decentralized that you can have chapters almost city by city, and it's so beautiful because you might not be able to be part of the national or the international body of the alumni, but you can really be a part of the alumni from the angle of your chapter, your city, and then you can get, and Africa is a very, very creative, very fun place, so alumni engagement from the angle of fun activities, from concerts to beach parties, all of those things that still make them feel good, while staying informed about the institution. I think those are some of the things that institutions like in UK or other countries can learn from African institutions, because sometimes just seeing emails about what's going on and all those things can get boring. Sometimes you just want to cool off, and I think that's what universities do well.
That was great. I guess I'm maybe a sort of follow-up question to that is, what in your experience has been a particularly successful alumni initiative that either you've implemented or that you've participated in or that you've advised on that might be unique to West Africa in the West African context?
Great. So for this one, I'm going to really, I just have to talk about this one. So this was one of the things that I did when I was working in the office that of the university where I started off from as an advancement professional. After that process of me going through all those files and trying to figure out how to make things work, I realized that I was a people person, and a lot of students who were on campus seeing me that I was just like 2 years ahead of them. I was working in the university. They're like, how did you do it? How did you become a staff of the university? And because there's a lot of concern, with people studying on campus, and like they don't know how they're going to get jobs after graduation, and so they want to learn from you. And I just said to them, get involved while you're on campus, but also be part of the process. So while doing that, I realized that there were many things I wanted to do. Remember, I said something about working in student recruitment and alumni engagement, and all of these things making you a manager. You must have an eye on many things. I knew that, we didn't have much presence online. I realized that for us to be able to, reach the kind of people we want to reach, we need to build our online presence. We need to ensure that we're putting out content. And so I instituted a student internship program on campus. And every year I would bring in students, about 6, and it got to a point that we had like 15 interns in the office. And then I will bring them in, to provide training for them. Of course, they have to apply for it. They need to submit their CV. They have to come for interviews. They would go through that process. We almost like employ them, and so we have photographers, we have cinematographers, we have social media managers, we had content writers, and these are things that they would do for fun, things that they would normally do, because your students will always talk about your university. You just need to manage control what they say in a way that still brings value to the work that you do. So I was doing that, and before we knew it, it helped them to build their job experience. It helped them. We had some scholarships, for trainings in tech, in videography, that we were able to send the students for. Do you understand? So that initiative for me was a very rewarding one, because it helps us to shape the institution's presence online, and students' viewpoint. And before we knew it, more students were doing those things without having to do it for the office. They were just doing it by themselves, and they would tag us, and then we would repost and all of that. So it was fun.
Yeah, that sounds like a really great initiative that allowed you to sort of grab the power of the student community and also harness that energy while maintaining a level of authenticity that the students could provide. Louis, I wanted to ask you, as we sort of round out our live show here, if you just launched your own podcast, right? And
Yes.
I wanted to make sure to ask you so that others can find you. Could you just talk for a minute about your podcast and where folks can find you and follow you?
Thank you. So the podcast is called Tyne Africa Podcast, and Tyne, if the full form of Tyne is the international education. So people will say, where is the N? The N is actually, IN is from international. So it's the International Education Africa podcast. The podcast is actually an offshoot of the work that we do from the broader Tyne Africa space, which is more working with those of our colleagues who work in international education, whether recruiting from Africa to other parts of the world or recruiting from within African institutions from other parts of the continent as well. But really bringing us together to, again, to share, to learn, to collaborate more, and to, to tap into the knowledge base that exists in the industry. So we have the summit and awards that happens every December in Nigeria. But the podcast itself is just to engage with those different topics. In the first 2 episodes, we've talked about inclusion in in international education. We've talked about in fact, the 3 episodes. The second episode was about partnerships, between agencies and institutions. And in the 3rd episode, we've also talked about technology in international education. The next one, I think, is also around alumni, and career opportunities for Africans who have studied overseas. And I think this would be relevant to our listeners and to everybody who come across this. So to find us, we're on Spotify, we are on Apple Podcasts, we're on YouTube Music, we're on YouTube as well. So just search for Tyne Africa Podcast, which is TINE Africa Podcast, and you find us. Please subscribe, I guess.
No, great. I highly encourage everyone to do so. Clearly, you are an excellent commentator on our space, and we're grateful to have you. We're fortunate enough to have you for a little more time, and we're going to record our bonus segment of the podcast with you so that listeners can hear more. But before we leave, Nicole, who are we going to be featuring in 2 weeks?
We're going to have Emily Robin, who is the Associate Dean of Advancement at London Business School. So looking forward to that conversation.
Yeah, Emily is someone I had interviewed years ago on a first podcast that I created back when she was the director of advancement at I believe it was the American School of Paris at the time. And she has since been to INSEAD and now at the London Business School. So she's an awesome guest, really excited about that one. And we will be back after a short break for podcast listeners. And for those of you who are watching on the CMAC LinkedIn feed, thank you for tuning in. And we'll be back next week with Alumless, and then the following week with Emily Robin from the London Business School. All right, we'll be back soon.
Sounds good. Bye.